Welcome to Inside Winnipeg Politics. I'm Kevin Klein, joined by two Winnipeg Sun columnists. We have Royce Coop, a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba, and Jeff Currier, who has been covering Manitoba politics for longer than I can remember. It's been a long time that I think that you've been covering Manitoba politics. It's good to have you both here. We had talked earlier about what would we like to talk about on this show, and one of the things that popped out was the equalization payments. They've now been released for 2025, 2026. Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, nothing, nada, zero. They don't need a dime from anybody else. Ontario needs 546 million dollars. Quebec, 13.6 billion, and Manitoba, which I think is the biggest on a per capita basis, gets $4.7 billion. Why is this happening and how long can we sustain this? Jeff, you had a column similar to this in the Winnipeg Sun, so I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on can we continue taking this welfare?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know people are going to be outraged that Quebec and Ontario, especially the amount Quebec is getting, will be outraged by that. And Royce can address this, I think, but it's clear that our equalization payment structure needs to be rethought, that there's something flawed in the system itself. But Manitobans ought to be concerned that we're receiving not just so much, but that we depend so heavily on money from other Canadians. Equalization payments were never designed to be a permanent solution to any province's economic woes. They were designed to help provinces or territories through some difficult periods so that basic services like health and education would be roughly the same right across the country. They're never going to be exactly the same everywhere, but to make sure that things are we're all pretty much on an even keel and an even footing right across the country. It was never intended to be a permanent solution, and yet Manitoba is permanently, it seems, on the dole. And there seems to be no indication on the part of any Manitoba government ever to say, you know what, maybe we should reduce the amount of money we take from other provinces and create our own wealth. I've never heard that from anybody, even a conservative government
No.
in Manitoba. There seems to be no ambition to get off the dole.
You know why? It's too easy from a guy that was in politics. I'll be honest with you. It's far too easy to spend other people's money. And that's how politicians look at it, right? It's a lot easier to spend some other people's money than have to deal with getting to work and get out there and make sales calls to bring people to Manitoba to start digging up minerals. I could go on for hours, but Royce, what are your thoughts on this from the perspective of these transfer payments that are going back and forth? And is it sustainable for Manitoba?
Yeah, the principle of equalization is a good one, and Canadians are broadly supportive of it. Canadians are going to support their countrymen in different regions. But when you look at the distribution in recent years, especially this year, it's clear that something is out of whack. The only have provinces in this country now are British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Ontario is receiving equalization payments. Ontario is not a poor province. Neither is Quebec, for that matter. And so I agree with Jeff. We need to address the formula because Canadians are, as I say, are broadly supportive, but they also can be alienated by a situation in which Alberta, for example, is contributing a lot to this program, and then doesn't really get or see any benefit from it. In fact, when Jason Kenney was premier, they had a referendum on equalization. Albertans here really disapproved of the system and the way that it was kind of redistributing money across the country in a way that was not advantageous for Alberta. So I would worry about that. I also think that the point that you made, Kevin, about the fact that equalization can become a welfare trap in some ways. Like it's easier just to get a check and spend it than it is to do so, develop your own natural resource sector like Alberta has done. That's hard. That there's real cost to that. It's much easier just to take the equalization money and spend it. I would much rather see a situation in which provinces are actually working to improve their revenue base, develop their natural resources so that they can kind of get out of this dependence on transfer payments and generosity of other Canadians.
And I think, Jeff, you talked about that in your column, right? There just does not seem to be the will among any elected official. And I agree, whether it was a conservative elected official or it's the NDP now, nobody wants to roll up their sleeves and do the work necessary to make us a have province. It's just missing. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so, Kevin. It's the basic element of ambition is missing. And we've talked about leadership in other segments of these conversations, and we just haven't had anybody at the head of our province stand up and say, we are going to get off welfare. We're going to turn this into the most prosperous place in Canada. We've got the ability to do it. We've got wonderful people here. We pay to educate great young minds and then watch them leave for those so-called have provinces. We have almost unlimited natural resources to tap into, and we're not tapping into those. We have great people. We've got great resources. We have all of the elements sitting in front of us to turn us into a prosperous place. What we lack is the gumption to do it.
We could be. When I was Minister of Environment, I learned and spoke to an ambassador from the EU. Manitoba is positioned to be the leader of clean green hydrogen. Now, a lot of people don't want to talk about that, and a lot of people in the government in my party, no, we don't want to talk about that. That's not a big thing right now. But that could be the most used source of fuel in Europe. That's their plan, and they needed 50% of their clean green hydrogen to come from Manitoba. There's only two places that can do it, Quebec and Manitoba. And Quebec is at their limit. They're at their capacity, so they can't do it. Manitoba can. So these are all these opportunities that, again, you just roll up your sleeves, you get to work and make it happen, because imagine if we were the leader. One last thing, I'll give you a couple of 30 seconds to answer it very quickly. How can the NDP government, how can WABCanoe continue to budget based on this payment when Pierre Poilievre wins? That's going to be some low-hanging fruit that they're going to have to knock down to bring our expenses under control. Yes or no?
I'm not sure. I think it's tough. Pierre Poilievre is a politician. Like, he's going to be a fiscal conservative, but messing with equalization, you have to kind of be careful with that. There are political implications to that. And I think that what you guys are talking about, developing Manitoba's own capabilities, it is possible. If you don't think it's possible, then look at our neighbor, Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is a province that is absolutely transformed from just a decade and a half ago when it was a full-on have-not province. It is a remarkable change. If they can do it in Saskatchewan, we can do it here too.
Yeah, and if we want to really see some prosperity among our First Nations and our First Nations peoples, developing our natural resources is maybe the clearest. I don't want to say simple because it's never simple, as Royce has pointed out. It's not simple, but it would be the most sensible, obvious, logical way to do it. And that's true reconciliation rather than just cutting people checks and issuing apologies and platitudes. Let's get the economy rolling and let's see some real prosperity on some of our First Nations.